All right. Hi, Sam.
Hello, Connor.
Doing this. I really appreciate it. Now, as I was literally just saying to you, like the reason I'm doing these talks is because, me putting this show out is a combination of understanding that I didn't want to just be one thing. I didn't want to just be an actor that was waiting for an opportunity to roll along, because I had ideas and I had feelings that I wanted to, give some artistic license. So it was about taking that chance on not just boxing myself in and taking the risk to be more than what I expected I could be. And we'll keep it directed at you. You are a person that I think like really exemplifies that. Like I've worked with you, I've known you for a few years now. And I mean, even just the information that you sent me about your journey and your evolution, like there's so much to it. You've had so many large pivots in your life where you realize a really new thing about yourself, and it kind of changed your perception of pretty much everything. And not just like accepting that new idea you had of yourself, but actually concretizing it and following it into something concrete. Like, you're a certified breathwork teacher now, which is crazy to me because, we work so hard on like being actors, and yet you've just like blown out of nowhere into like this spiritual well-being guru. And I think that that's amazing. And I really want to like get into that and how you find the inspiration and the courage to do that. Um, so yeah.
Well, you just said courage, and I love courage because in Latin, courage, like core, is I think your heart or like love, and it takes courage to like live from your heart.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you have to have this sense of fearlessness. Um, but well, thank you for that intro. I would, I always, there's like what you kind of touched on with like, there's these big pit, like I have a lot of, I went from being like an athlete to working on finance. And then I was like, fuck this, I'm going to acting school. And then I was like, fuck this, I'm doing this. So I definitely react pretty quickly to when something is making me feel boxed in. I would say I've always been very sensitive to that my entire life. Um, but then, those awkward ages when like you're trying to be cool, like the cool kid, you kind of just like
I know,
allow
I know what
yourself
you're talking about. That doesn't ring any bells to me.
to I feel like being cool is like all about having like no opinion and just like being in a box. And I felt like, so I kind of was very submissive in my middle school and high school and college years because I just kind of like wanted to be cool. So I was like, okay, I'm going to fit into this box. And then New York was like such an inspiring city of, wait, if you're in a box, you're totally not cool. Like New York City doesn't really celebrate the box.
Mm-hmm.
And but I was working in such like a box career path, and it wasn't matching up with what I was vibing from the city. And so yes, then I quit. I went to acting school. We met, and I felt like it was crazy because acting school celebrates the human experience and all the like, I always use this image of like a disco ball because it has like all these pieces of glass that shine a different way. And acting school like so celebrated that. And then when I got out, it was like, okay, I have to only be one thing. I have to just be a serious actor. My Instagram can only look like I'm an actor, and I can only talk about acting things, or else people are going to be like, Sam doesn't take being an actress seriously, or like, what is she doing? And then a big moment happened to me in a little bit before COVID. A family friend of mine's sister, or a good friend of mine's sister, who I grew up playing volleyball with, um, um, passed away, very randomly and suddenly. And she was only 30. And I remember in that moment, it was right before Christmas of 2019. And I was like, oh my God, like like, I don't care how old I am, my life could be taken away in a second why am I going to allow myself to like follow these boxed rules of how you're going to be a successful actress or how you're going to be a successful artist? And so I kind of just started digging really deep. And then COVID kind of happened, and it was this kind of beautiful thing. Like 4 months before COVID happened, I already started digging into fear of what people thought of me and my choice to be an actor. And I had been so interested in spirit. I mean, I got trained in Reiki when I was 18. When I was in acting school, whether you knew it or not, I was accessing my Akashic records to my characters. And I mean, you saw me. I sat next to you. I had all my crystals on my lap, and
I knew something was going on. Like you were packing. Like there was a lot in your area. But yeah, that's interesting news though. I actually didn't know the intensity of it. Not in a bad
yeah,
way.
oh, yeah. When I was doing, Lizzie, Mrs. Perkapile, that was like all. I mean, I don't know how good it was, but like I was like when I was at home working on my character, I was accessing their records and channeling ideas. So, but I kept it so hidden
Mm-hmm.
because I was like, no, I'm an actress. I'm not a healer. I'm not an energy worker. And so then when the lockdown happened and we couldn't really do much as actors, I was like, I'm sitting on this breath work that I love. And I was doing it with my friends on the side at their houses. I was like having little seances and, the whole thing. And I was like, wow, this is like, we all have so much to offer. And it is art. Like doing anything is art. And I felt I was really cutting myself short by just allowing that actress, but this like weird idea of an actress.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. Like that's something that I have sort of been thinking about a lot for the last few years, and it's inspired a lot of things, particularly like in my move to attempt to write something. Which again, I don't know whether that's going to succeed or not, but we'll just wait and
Yeah.
see. But I don't know. Like I came out of because we did the summer program in 2016 together. I came out of that, and I had this weird thought of anyone that's successful in any profession is a creative, because otherwise how does any profession progress? Like it doesn't move beyond the point at which you enter it. So anyone that enters something and is good at it, they will build something new because they have to, otherwise nothing moves. And so taking that, then this perception that you found of wanting to be more than one thing, wanting to exist outside of the box, it almost to me feels like that the box you want to sit in, wow, this is going to get so spiritual. I know you're going to like it, but it's going to be so weird. But like the box becomes you are the box. Like the box is your body, right? And everything that is inside of it is the one thing. Like it is the one thing. And once you understand that all of these different thoughts and perceptions that you have are part of like your direct channel inside of your individual box, then the world opens up to you, because you're not battling with this concept of self where it's like, oh, I have to be this or this. There's no fork in the road. It's just about finding a way for all of it to meld together and build something new.
Right. And I think I wrote that was that like okay, we're going to talk about like you being your box, that like no one else has this box of this shape and this color and the stuff inside. Is if you allow yourself to be your own box instead of trying to put yourself into someone else's idea. It's really just a projection, right? Because like no one is holding up, like tying your hands behind your back being like, you got to be in this box.
It's also just like no one gives a shit. Like no one is paying that much attention to you that they actually care what you do.
Before this, we started early. For everyone who didn't know, I came an hour early because I was so excited. But a friend just tagged me in this quote on Instagram because I was talking to her about she wants to start a podcast. And I was like, Alexis, I hate to break it to you, but no one thinks about you. everyone's thinking about themselves. And I don't want to say no one cares about you, but like no one's really thinking about you all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and usually some people don't really come to that like aha moment until they're like 60 or 50.
Yeah.
And, you know,
It's too late.
it's too late. But no one's really like, I had to tell myself that back in March when I was like so nervous about posting on Instagram about my true feelings about anything, to be honest. And I had to like really look at myself and I was like, dude, Sam, no one is thinking about you. No one is like, no one really cares.
You were just
And
constantly like sitting on your Instagram feed, just like waiting for something to pop up. Oh my God, what's she got to say next? Where's she going to go?
let's do it. Let Sam do it. Um, so that's why I love this idea of like, it's always a project, like it's my projection. And it's also like taking responsibility. But that box is like, if you really let yourself be your own box, you can bear like unique fruit that has never existed before. And then you don't have all these robots or these people who are the same. And I think like looking at it now, all like the successful writers, directors, actors, anyone, they really let them, I mean not everyone, but like, you know, the ones that we like.
The cool ones. Yeah, the cool ones.
Like they made their own cocktail. It was like their own recipe. And it makes it so much more interesting. And I mean, I still battle with this. Like, it's still a little bit of a trigger when people are like, oh, so are you not acting anymore? Are you like just doing breath work? And I'm like, no, why can't I be both?
It's annoying because I struggle sometimes. Sometimes I'm like really harsh on people. You know, they'll ask something, and to me it'll feel like shallow and like that kind of a question, right? Of like, oh, so you just doing this? Are you not doing this anymore? I'll overanalyze that until that person becomes a villain in my eyes, like that. Like it's really unhealthy. But the reality is that like it's an extension of that idea of like they're not paying that much attention. So it's like once you answer that question and say like, no, I'm doing both, they're not going to reject that concept. Like they're literally just kind of waiting for you to answer the question.
Yeah.
So again, it's just about, it all comes back to self-acceptance, really. Like you just kind of have to accept where you are and what you're at least trying to do, whether you're doing it or not. Like the first step is trying. So without the self-acceptance of knowing that you're going to attempt something, yeah, you're not going to move. Like you're not going anywhere.
Right. I have a career coach, and she always like,
What a fucking flex.
I love her. She's like so cool. And she always like talks about like moving your needle.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that in my first year here after moving from New York, I was going on like every single commercial audition, you know, and I booked like a handful of commercial auditions. I like checked all these things off of my boxes of like, okay, get into SAG, book this many commercials. And I did it, but I was like, I didn't feel like I was moving my career. Because anyone who's gone on a commercial audition knows that you don't feel too good after. I mean, it's like,
I just remember because I stayed with you and your partner Eli for a night like last year. And I just remember him talking about some of the experiences that he was having when he was walking. And the first thing he told me was like, yeah, it's pretty humbling to go and audition for commercials. They make you do some weird stuff. And I was like, I don't even want to know. Like, I just, it kind of like puts me out, you know?
yeah. And so you have to find things that move your needle. So now I find that like when and I'm sure maybe this is probably what you felt with like writing and coming up with this play, is when you take it into your like, now me doing breath work and, you know, I'm posting more on Instagram and whatnot, like I find that is moving my needle, like my creative needle. and so now when I go do these auditions, I like kind of like, they're kind of fun, like funny, and because my needle's being moved. And that's why I say like, once you kind of like like be in your own box and it's coming from your personal worth, not from someone else's or someone else's idea, like I feel like I've been like way more creative since I've like unboxed myself,
Mhm.
um, than I have ever in my life.
Well, it comes like I was thinking about this today actually, because I mean, I knew that we were going to end up talking about this stuff. And, you know, when we were training, I've never felt like more open and alive, like in my life. And that's just because we were doing that stuff all the time. Like we were constantly, you know, expanding our minds and our creativity. Like it was all just, it was wide open. Like it was wide open, man. And so a lot of stuff was going on. I mean, I was never, while we were training, thinking about writing, and yet I would have ideas of like, oh, this could be a cool thing if I ever decided to write down the line. Like this is just an idea that's floated to me. But then ever since we graduated, and I know that this has happened for a lot of people, is like you leave that bubble of freedom and relaxation, I feel like is the state you find yourself in a lot of the time. You leave that, and the anxieties of like, oh shit, I got to turn this into something like that. It just, the walls appear and you feel so boxed in and you feel yourself hardening, right? Like all of that softness that you need to actually make anything good starts to disappear because you're like scared that it's not going to pan out. And it's this self-defeating thing where you're constantly trying to rally against those anxieties, and you trying to fight them doesn't get you anywhere. Like you don't go anywhere if you get in a battle with them, because they just start to consume you. Like they are you. They just start to eat away at you. So finding that balance again of, you know, finding that open space where I can actually create something from, it's still a challenge. Like it's still a challenge. I mean, I'm trying to sell this play to people. So there's clearly that anxiety that's still going to be there of like, fuck, this has got to be good. Like, this has got to be good. Otherwise it's not going to live up to some random person's expectation that they don't actually have of me. um, yeah. So, I mean, I admire you for basically challenging that feeling in a manner of accepting it and exploring it.
Yeah. Yeah, the gripping becomes so real. Like how I said in the beginning, like whenever I feel that feeling of like boxness, it's funny, I told Eli this. I was looking back at our first years, you know, remember like your loves. I don't know if you did that in loves and hates list. Did you guys do that in
Oh, I
Bruce's?
know what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about, but I didn't do it.
And I wrote in my loves, I love breaking up with people. But
That's
it's like whenever I feel boxed in or like something's not like aligned, I'm like, wow, I need to change. And I felt myself that first year. So all of 2019 essentially, like myself starting to like grip on to, you need to make this work. You didn't just go to 2 years of like a conservatory where, you know, you were with like amazing actors and you had an amazing teacher and you were working on amazing plays, and like you have to make this work and you have to prove your parents that it was all worth it.
that's such a fucking real thing. That's so real. Um, yeah. But so, because obviously, you know, you made such a drastic progression. I didn't know, or I must have maybe forgotten that you worked in finance. Like, I just like, that blew my mind when I read it. You know, I was like, oh my God, really? Like, it was that, it's that much of a 180. And I understand that that probably comes from, you know, like family inspiration. Like, I know a bit about your family. Um, and you talk about how there was a mentality of just doing one thing. You know, you just you got to focus on one thing, and that is a beneficial mindset until it's like not. You know, there comes that point where you're like, again, you feel boxed in because you know that it's not right for you. But it's like if you take your foot off the gas pedal a little bit and you try to pivot to something that might not work, then the car's going to slam into a tree. Like it's
Right.
just, it's all over. So like how long do you think you've been wrestling with that mentality from a family perspective where like internally it was difficult?
It started with volleyball. I actually hated volleyball.
Really? Oh,
I I mean, I love being competitive. I love I love screaming and being like, ah. So, but I did theater and I was a dancer, whether you believe it or not. And And I just got taken to the volleyball. I actually tried to convince my dad to let me move to Paris when I was little. Like, I always wanted to do something. When I was really tiny, I wanted to be a model. Like, I always wanted to. I used to print out auditions. I lived in LA. Like, of course I wanted to be an actor when I was a kid. And my dad, and I'm so happy that I didn't do that, to be honest. As a kid, I'm really grateful. I've learned so much from athletics, but I really did not like volleyball. And I tried to quit all the time. But my dad was like, so, keep with it. This is going to get you into college. And then volleyball got me into like an amazing, I went to USC, which is like, I would have never been able to get into with my birds. And 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 then when I was at USC, I was like trying to quit all the time. I was calling my dad, crying all the time, like, please, I just want to quit. And it was just that mentality, like, you have to, like, you're doing one thing, you're an athlete, like, stick with it, it'll be worth it. And then when I left college, I moved to New York, and I actually wanted to try to get into sports broadcasting because I felt that was the one thing that was not too late to get into. Like, acting felt like a childhood dream that I missed the train. Mm-hmm. And then I found my way into finance, and I called my dad all the time, like, I hate this, please, please. But I was so tied to making my dad proud. And there was also this sexiness about finance, to be honest, that made me feel like I was making my own money. Yeah. And I was making like more money than like the guys I was hanging out with, like it was like,
you're the one paying for dinners, man.
Yeah. I was like, I don't need you to buy me a drink. And then my mom, I got sick and my mom got diagnosed with cancer, and she's fine. But in that moment, I didn't know if she was going to be fine. And that was like the big pivotal, another moment where life is too short. Like, I feel like I've had these like 2 life is too short moments. And that's when I was like, I can't do this anymore. I need to get out of this mentality where you just pick one thing. Like, I was so like drowned in my dad's idea of, and it worked for him, and so I don't blame him for like putting that out there, but I just was like so not in my DNA.
So I was thinking, the first time that when you were talking about how your friend had passed and you had that first moment of, well, I mean, technically, chronologically, it was the second, but that moment of, life's too short to be wasting time on things that don't feed me. And my immediate thought was like, oh, it's so sad that like we have to wait for those moments to come to us. And then you said it again. I was like, oh, that's even sadder that it's like it took twice before it really started to sink in. But then this is not a question. This is a statement, and you're just going to have to like listen to it. But I think that's the beautiful thing about what you're doing, right? Where you're in a position where unfortunate circumstances led to you having those realizations. But the most beautiful thing you can do with those realizations is find a way to give them back to other people. So it's like, no one would ever wish anyone to go through those circumstances just to have that lesson of like, life is short. I better do something that I have fun doing. So it's like, I think it's a really beautiful thing that you're doing now, in that you are just giving that lesson back to people without the sacrifices having to be made by them. Like, that's a very selfless thing. So I applaud you.
Thank you. I feel very passionate about people living like fearless. And like I always say, like, oh, because that was the second moment where I was like, God, I'm so bogged down by fear. The moment with my mom was like, do what you love. And then the second moment was like, okay, do what you love and don't be fucking afraid of anything. No one's like thoughts about you, what anyone thinks about you, like just live, like as cliche as it sounds, but just like live your life.
Mhm.
and no one's thinking about you.
Literally, it's funny because I watched Dave Letterman's interview with Lizzo yesterday, and I mean she blows my mind in the way that she blows everyone's mind, where it's like she feels like this mystical animal. It's like, how does anyone have that much self-esteem, right? Like, how does anyone have the courage to just recklessly pat themselves on the back and then just like nonchalantly pass that on to other people? And there's a bit in the interview where they show a clip from one of her concerts where, you know, she's like telling everyone in the crowd to like turn to the person next to you, tell them that you love them and that they're the best person ever. And then she gets everyone in the crowd to say the same shit back to her. And I'm like, yo, like I'm watching this and I'm getting really emotional because I'm like, I don't do this. And not a lot of people do this. You see people in this crowd like weeping. And I'm like, yeah, it's really tough. Like the more of a drought that you implement yourself by not bringing that mindset into your life, the more intense it is to introduce this idea of self-love. But it's like, it's got to start somewhere. And sometimes it doesn't start with you. Sometimes it starts with someone giving you that blessing of like, yeah, like I believe in you, and therefore you should believe in you.
Right.
And no matter who teaches it to you, someone else or yourself, like it's a tough lesson to learn because we usually are going through at least 15 years of not having that. You know, the world is conditioned to cultivate this mindset of like, I need to be this successful unit in one stream, like one main stream. And it's like, that's just not necessarily the case. Or if it is the case, it's never going to work if you don't believe in yourself. So again, like having that realization for yourself is one thing, and then having the wherewithal to give it to other people is another.
Right. And to love yourself, to find the joy. Cause I always find that these people who've had this kind of like crazy journey, it's like they only get they only feel the love, or I don't know, or get the love when they're successful.
Mm-hmm.
Like no one cares about them when they're at the top, but once they're on the top, they get all the interviews, you hear their story. So it's about like having such an intense romantic relationship, and not like, and that's not narcissistic to love yourself. Like I think there's also this false notion if you love yourself like you're a narcissist. But I really think that like sometimes I look at Eli will walk into me, he'll walk into me in the bathroom and I'll just be like in the mirror, I'm like, yeah, like you got that. Like I'll like, and so I'll look at my skin, I'll be like, you are amazing. Like to have this, like just like admiration for like the gifts that you are given, and you're so unique, even when you're maybe not quote unquote like at the level of success that you want to be at yet, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because this is one thing that I was talking about with Zoe, who I think her interview will be up before yours goes up, so this should make sense if people are paying attention.
Yeah.
But you know, we talked about this idea of how do you as an artist, but not even just as an artist, how do you as anyone trying to accomplish anything cultivate the ability to determine when something is good, right? Like how do you develop this ability to be able to congratulate yourself on a job well done? Because it's hard, like you're battling that thing inside of you that wants to tear anything you do down and point out the flaws. But then there's also that other animal that really is just about bettering yourself. You know, it unconsciously sees the good stuff, but consciously sees the stuff that can be better. And so that's another like internal battle that, again, with the work that you're starting to do, which is just about sitting with the self, and there is no end point. Like your work doesn't finish, the same as, you know, a therapist, which is why I like / love that, you know, therapy and spiritual therapy are starting to be considered in the same sentence. Because, you know, therapy for a long time has had this whole like, yeah, if you're in therapy, you're like, you're fucked up, but B, like you're working on it. And
Yeah.
spiritual therapies like that, but I actually think it has less of the negative connotations, because for some reason, and maybe this is just my experience with it talking, and if I was like a, you know, pedestrian looking from the outside in, it might not be this way, but it has this positive spin of like, if you're invested in your spiritual well-being, there's a lightness there, there's joy and there's love that can be found, as opposed to like actively digging through your trauma and all your bullshit.
Right.
yeah, and so it's an interesting thing that you have to do where you just have to sit with yourself and really pay attention to yourself with this understanding that you aren't going to get to like the final chapter and be like, oh, I know everything that I need to know now. You will constantly critique yourself and critique things that you do, but it's having that exist in relationship with a positive understanding of yourself that's really important.
Yeah, it's like the this was my breathwork class yesterday, we were talking about discernment and having like such conscious discernment about with your mind and your thoughts. In yoga, there's this concept of the lower mind and the higher mind.
Mm.
And the lower mind is it's like the like or dislike button. It's preferential. It decides like whether something's good or bad. And it's a cocktail of your self-identity, your memories, your senses. And so it's a little bit of like your ego-y. It's not bad, even though it's called the lower mind, because it actually is what creates you, Connor.
Yeah.
But it also is fueled by emotions. So if you are very fixed in some like a trauma or like a memory, it could cause you to suffer essentially. If And then there's your higher mind, which is the discernment. It's like your wise, it's like spirit, your intuition. It's not preferential. It's kind of just like an omnipresent thing, and it can't be it like can't nothing can affect it. It's just pure. But what happens is like your lower mind it eclipses it. It like gets in the room when they should be in their own rooms. And so like having that awareness, like, okay, is this true or not? Like when you're talking about your work, if it's bad or if it's good, like, okay, what part of my mind is this coming from? Is this coming from like a childhood trauma that I'm being hard on myself? Or like, hey, maybe this isn't that good, but at least I'm taking a step forward and I'm just going to put it out there. So having this like, and that's why meditation is amazing, because even if you're not a meditator, or like you meditate and it's bad, like you're like, I couldn't shut my mind off, you're exercising that higher mind. So every time you get on the cushion and you meditate, or you try to meditate, or you do something like breath work, you're exercising that higher mind and like moving the lower mind to its own room. So you kind of like hear the truth of, okay, was that a bad like work I did, or am I just creating a story that's been running in my head out of fear?
Yeah. It's kind of like when people say, I hope that no one watching this is called Sandra. For example, let's say someone's called Sandra and then it's a child and they're like, oh, that's such an old person's name. Sandra is such an old person's name. It's like, yeah, but how the fuck does it become an old person's name if they're not called that when they're little? Like, it's nonsensical. To the same degree. It's like, how can you consider yourself spiritually aligned if you don't start in a place that's not spiritually aligned? Like, you have to work on it.
You have to, exactly. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that, Sandra. That was a good one.
I've been sitting with that thought for a while, but I've never been able to use it in the context of anything else. It's just like a thing I point out. And I'm like, it's not really that interesting, but now it has a purpose. Because that was great. We basically just got like a bit of a breathwork lesson from you, at least.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah, we don't have to pay for that. That's free. But what about breathwork specifically spoke to you?
Spoke to me. Well, the first time I did breath work was, well, actually Sarah, another one of our classmates, she did it with me. And I was like, oh, I like that this is physical. It's like a very active meditation. And then I signed up for like a class with Sarah's teacher and I hated it. I was like, fuck this, close the computer. This was like not for me. And then 6 months later, Sarah says, Sam, I really think you should take it with this guy, David Elliott. And I thought it was just like a weekend workshop. Like I was like so craving being with some weirdos. Like I had been in LA now for like, 3 months, and I was already starting to feel a little like LA. Like I was like, I need some meat.
Hey, you guys were living right on Venice. You were probably getting a contact high from down by the beach, though.
Exactly. Yeah, that is true. Um, and I went, and for me, sorry, I can't help myself but like dig myself into stories, but I went, and I was like, my mind was blown. I had been doing a lot of healing work since I was 18 when I started with Reiki. Um, and I always felt like I was giving my power to someone else to tell me what was wrong with me or tell me how to fix myself. And in breath work, even though like when I have my breath work classes, I'm holding the space, I'm creating the playlist, I'm giving you cues, but there's something so empowering. It's your breath. It's you are doing it. Even if I, let's just say, didn't have the music on or wasn't there, you can do it on your own. And I did it, and all this stuff came up that I always thought in my healing sessions, it's only my dad, and it's like, about like my dad essentially. And when I did it, like my brother came up, like gratitude, like all this stuff that I never really knew that my body was trying to express. And so I find it's the cheapest, the quickest, the easiest way to healing and to get your mind out. I mean, we're essentially using the breath to override your mind. So that's why it's an active breathing meditation, because when you're purposefully activating your body so that your mind gets very aggravated in the beginning, and then it just shuts out and you get into a state of flow, and your body is like rushed with like emotions and feelings. And talk about creativity. Actually, David was an actor before he started teaching breath work. So there's a lot of artists, and he works with the guy who wrote Crazy Rich Asians. Him and David worked on that together.
Oh, interesting.
Through breath work.
Wow. I never would have even, that would never have crossed my mind. That's amazing.
Yeah, so he works with like a ton of Hollywood like artists to get their creative, like get their mind, talk about the lower higher mind, get the lower mind out of the way so you can tap in to that higher mind of creativity. Like some of my best ideas have come after I'm done with the breath work and I'm just lying there, and I usually give like a 10 to 15 minute shavasana, so it's like a resting period. And that's why I like it, because it still feels like healing but also so creative.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it comes back to that thing that I think it was in Voice and Speech where we talked about this, but the idea of tension reveals nothing. Like I know that, when we were training, you find that all the time, that you're going to have a breakthrough once you recognize where the tension in your body is. And it's not until that like piece of tension is undone that you feel available to whatever's coming. And that's the problem that I think a lot of artists have, is as they're furiously trying to either solve a problem or come up with an idea, it immediately turns into this intellectual process, because they're effectively like clenching their entire body, being like, pop out this idea or this solution. And it doesn't work that way. More often than not as well, like the solution or the idea that you're looking for is not anything, you can't predict it. Like you don't just, you do intuitively know it, but it's not like, you can't find it in the answers section of a book somewhere. It has to just like come to you. And if you're not in a state that's available and open to things, you're never going to receive it.
Right. It's like what Bruce says. And Bruce, if you're listening, I use you all the time, my brother, like the give up, give in, give way. Like that, I want to get that fucking tattooed on me sometimes. Cause I'm like, cause when you just like give in and you like give up the control or like the gripping, that's when all like, oh, so much magic happens.
Yeah. I mean, and obviously I feel like you would be aware of this. Like a lot of your experience with sport must have helped and hindered you with the physical side of the spiritual work, where it's like you would have a great understanding of your body. Like you would just know when something's off. But then I imagine that there would have been a lot of tension that you would have had to undo because of all of
I
that.
remember I said it in summer session. I don't know if it was Eric or maybe it was Alexander first. Some teacher like totally called me out for being an athlete. And I remember being like, what was it that obvious? Like, and I remember movement first year. I was so like I had a lot of like freedom. Like movement wasn't that hard for me to buy into. But thinking back to the beginning, like I was so mechanical, like because I was used to my body being very like it had to be strong and mechanical that I was almost muscling out the movement. So I was like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna do this perfectly. Like instead of just like kind of like letting it have my own expression.
Yeah, because I remember that was something that I'm very like acutely aware of the fact that there's probably someone that might watch this and be like, they're just like talking about all this inside shit from when they were training as actors. I don't know any of these people that they're talking about. But, you know, our mask teacher, Akil, you know, one of the things that he talked about where he talks, a lot of his work is structured around the chakras, you know, and we sort of escalate through those zones and understand them really intimately. And we implement exercises that you can work through to unlock them if they are clouded or just closed over because of any particular reason. When we're talking about will, which is a very strong place, like that is the primal space that you work from as an artist. Like you have to have a really strong willpower. And we were putting that into a kind of movement. Of course, the movement itself is strong, and the big one that we used at the start of classes would be just like punching out and screaming. But when you're doing your sort of own like free form motion and effectively what it becomes is imitating this tension, you can't have the tension in your body because again, it's not revealing anything. Like it's actually inhibiting what might come through that space within yourself. But it's like, of course it has the appearance of tension because it's about strong will. There is strong intention behind that movement. However, there's not tension. There's intention, right, but not tension.
Going back to the box, it's like, don't do someone else's box, like do your box. Like it's still a box.
Yeah,
but like
it's a box.
It's your yeah, totally.
Wow. Do you feel like there's more evolution in you, or do you find that the spiritual work you're doing now is such an open creative field that you're just kind of going to sit there for a bit, or do you just not know?
It's so funny that you said, I don't, sometimes I go through waves. Like sometimes I'm feeling like a lot and I'm like, okay, there's a lot of work that's happening right now. And, you know, I'm crying. I'm very uncomfortable. But it's kind of fun. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm a person. Like I'm a human. Like this is happening to me. Like, it's almost like this self-lacerating, like you kind of like it.
That got us through our work, I reckon. I mean, it was really, there was always those races that you have in class. Like, who's going to be the first one to cry?
Yes.
Fun to like experience this emotion. It's like, yeah, cool. Like you get to the end of it and you're like, why the fuck did we do that? It was like, we're literally just like children at the start of this process.
Right, exactly. Oh my God, who's gonna be the first one to cry? It's so true.
But for the record, I think I was the first one to cry in my class.
Really? You got the gold star. Everyone's like, fuck Connor, I wanted to be the first one.
Too bad for them. They're not sensitive enough. What can I say?
I sometimes find as of recently, like talking in recent terms, I feel like it's not numb. I'm not numb, but I almost feel like I'm in a space of expansion right now, which is nice, especially in such a turbulent time where I'm like, what's like, I'm not feeling turbulent. And in the beginning, I judged it. I was like, am I numbing out? But I was like, no, these past couple months have just been like grinding with like emotional and spiritual work. And I've just been working so much on that. And, I mean, I'm on 10 Zooms a day. Like, I'm like, and at like night, whenever I can fit them in, like constantly immersing myself in anything that has to do with spirit or energy work, and living like a more aligned and happy creative life. So right now I would say I'm in a place of expansion, but it ebbs and flows. Like, watch, I'm gonna fucking say that, and I'm gonna call you tomorrow, Connor.
You'll have an idea. You'll have an idea that you're gonna pitch to me. You want me to invest.
Yeah.
That's really fascinating, because when I spoke to Zoe, we talked about this in two different circumstances, where she talked about her work as a visual artist. She was coming out the back end of a cycle where she just, had grown to be kind of like unhappy with her image, and she kind of wants to change it a little bit. But at the same time, like, hasn't been working too much, and she knows she's like about to explode. She's like, I want to get a studio and start working. I've got all these ideas. But then on top of that, like the context that we're sitting in right now has an effect on that. And it's funny, because in normal life, we're conditioned as artists to question when we have those moments of maybe not tranquility, but they're not so turbulent. And you kind of go like, what's off here? Like, there's something off, and I don't know what it is. But, you have to consider that the space that we've been living in is not normal. Like, what we're going through is totally foreign. No one has experienced this. Like, it hasn't happened since the Spanish flu. And even then, like, they didn't have Instagram and Twitter and Facebook that were like messing with their wiring through it all. So yeah, I totally see where you're coming from. It's a fascinating space to sit in, where you kind of don't know where you're going. Like, you feel like there might be something going on, but you can't trust anything, because you just have never felt exactly like this before.
Right. It's the magic dark.
That's a really mysterious way to put it, and I like it. Because I've definitely had those moments in the last few months where I'm like slipping into a space that feels otherworldly, of like, your mind is trying to live through a life that you can't live right now. Like, it's trying really hard, and yet your body is in effectively a kind of stasis. And again, that's why you've seen people either suffer or thrive through a time like this, because they're either, finding ways to bring the mind and body back together in such a weird time, or they're just letting them drift further and further apart.
Right. It's that idea of the rigidity, going back to the lower mind. The, like, whether you suffer or not is the rigidity or the flexibility. So I find that the people that are able to like be really flexible with this time that we're in are the ones that are thriving, or that I'm seeing who are thriving. But if you're being rigid with what was before, then those are the people that are having a really hard time with right now. And like, it's just, I mean, I talk about water like a lot on my like, because I just am always like, you got to be able to, like, to get through these times, you got to be like water, and just like keep like moving with the current instead of swimming against it, or trying to stay still.
Are you a water sign?
I'm actually not. I have so much fire. I'm a Virgo. I'm a Virgo sun, Leo moon, Pisces rising. So my rising is a water sign, but it's like the only amount of water in my whole natal chart. I have like 5 planets in Leo. So that actually isn't but I think the Virgo in me, which is like super grounded, like I'm kind of cool with everyone moving around me.
Yeah, for sure.
And you're a Cancer.
Yo, I'm just the biggest Cancer. Tony did my birthday the other day actually, and it was intense. There was a lot of information coming at me at once.
Wait, what's your moon and your rising? Do you remember?
I think I'm a Leo moon, maybe.
You, me, and Eli are all Leo moons. That's why
Yeah.
we're active.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. I think that's what it was. I hope I'm not confusing them. But I think that's what it was. There was, like I said, there was a lot of information coming at me. Like it was a full-on calculation. But that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, sorry.
The
recording's over.
it's like, I'm going to have to quickly edit all this out. They know too much about me now. No, the one other thing I did want to ask, like obviously because we've had so much downtime, what has been the thing that's fed you the most? Like, have you been reading a lot, watching some certain things, or?
I've gone through 2 notebooks.
Yo.
Of like I I'm not one to have just like one notebook and it be like looking for it. I've been taking notes like like I just want to, like, I've been, honestly, the thing that's been keeping me sane is immersing myself. I have like some teachers that I really look um I don't want to say look up to, but they help me remember who I am or remember how to live this unboxed life. So, I mean, mine writing notes, listening to their Instagram lives, podcasts. I've been listening to so many podcasts. I'm not a big reader, to be honest. Just gonna admit it. I had dyslexia as a kid, so I fucking hate it. But I listened to a lot.
They wanted you to live up to the expectation of being a reader. They're so disappointed now. Oh no.
I never read those summer reading books. But so that's, I think, what has kept me most inspired, has kept me staying afloat, has kept me, I don't want to say excited for these times, but I'm like, let's go. I definitely have like a warrior. I think that's my athletic, but like, I'm like, let's go. Like, I'm ready to rock and roll through these times. So yeah, that's definitely, in the beginning it was painting, and then I was like, I'm not really that good at this. That's whatever. And then it was banana bread.
How generic.
Yeah. Talk about a box.
Okay. Well, I mean, we've been talking for a while. And I mean, obviously, like, I feel like we could ramble on about a bunch of different stuff, but it'll start to get very, very informal. So the last thing I'll do is you host online breathwork sessions, don't you?
Yes, I do.
So
I do.
When are they?
Well, right now they're on Wednesday nights and on the weekends. I switch, so you have to follow me on Instagram because I'm all over the place. But usually, Tuesday or Wednesday or a Saturday and Sunday. I don't really sway on Monday, Thursdays, and Fridays.
Not your days.
So.
Okay, cool. Well, I mean, obviously, like, I'll be putting your Instagram handle everywhere, and people definitely should be hitting you up for breath work, because obviously, as you have proven in the last almost an hour, you're pretty tapped into this stuff, and you're also just very passionate about it, which is probably the most important element anyone can have within something that they're doing, is to just be passionate about it. So thank you so much for doing that.
It was excited to see the play.
Yeah, I'm nervous, so I can't wait for it to be over. No, I am excited. I'm excited. And so it'll be great. But again, thank you so much for doing this. I will speak to you soon. I don't know about anyone else, but I will.
Yeah, awesome.
Okay, thank you, Sam.
Thank you.